Hi everyone, it's been a little while. I'm going to jump right into this. I'm going to try to keep it relatively short. Obviously, a lot has happened recently and things are, kind of in a state of flux. I think it's difficult to know exactly what's going on. But I had a really wonderful visit with a dear friend of mine this morning, and we talked about a lot about these issues. And I mean, of course, times like this cause a person to reevaluate a lot of things, even personally, let alone, within the broader culture and everything else. And so I feel like that's a place that I'm at as well right now, having shut my shop down several years ago and feeling a little bit of kind of personal unease since then as well, and not being really comfortable with where I've landed. We're kind of at a broader watershed moment, and obviously it feels like something big is happening. Obviously, we're all part of something really rather large, and it's been building for quite a while. And to that end, I revisited a few of my older videos, spanning about somewhere between 8-9 years ago and up to about 5 years ago. And some of the videos were prior to that as well, but in particular, there are a few videos that I had made that I've revisited where I was forewarning. I was sort of laying out the groundwork for the dangers of the ideological Cold Wars turning into ideological hot wars. And I was warning against this. And it's interesting because watching these, watching these videos back, in some ways I'm embarrassed. I feel like I was naive even in what I thought. But of course, I wasn't exactly naive because I was warning about the dangers of this going forward. And yet, one of the first videos that I watched is Punching Civilization in the Face, I think it is. And that was a reference to back when Richard Spencer, I think it was the fellow it was about, someone had punched him in the face because they had made the determination that he's a neo-Nazi or something like that. And they had made that determination to themselves and then extrajudicially decided on a course of justice. And at that time, luckily for Richard Spencer, I suppose, that was the extent of what at least the person was willing to enact in the name of what they saw as justice. And I was warning against all of that for the obvious civilizationally necessary reasons. I mean, at least as I see it. And of course, the reason I say I'm a little embarrassed I feel like it was almost naive of me is because of how far we've come in that period of time. Because yes, there were a number of people that were coming out in support of that idea of punching a Nazi in the face. That's really what I was responding to, not the single instance of one person doing an act to one other person, regardless of that person's virtues or bad ideology or whatever. It was the response to that of support, and I was saying that's not a good idea. And now the amount of support for a horrendous act that is threatening to civilization is off the charts. And it is quite alarming, it's quite unnerving, and it's harrowing, I would say. And that's what it makes it seem almost like, wow, you were naive, you had no idea. I kind of did. I had foreshadowed it myself in my own mind, and that's why I was speaking out against it. I'm going to link that video to here for anyone who would be interested in seeing it. There was that one, Punching Civilization in the Face, which is what I think is happening when you do that. When you kind of break the convention that we'd all come to agree upon, when it comes to the rule of law and presumption of innocence and having a proper hearing to determine guilt or innocence and having an agreed upon punishment, carried out, et cetera, you're punching civilization in the face more than you're punching Richard Spencer in the face. I subsequently had another one about the Berkeley riots. I think this was when Milo Yiannopoulos was going to speak, and a bunch of people rioted because they don't want him there. Again, how far we've come. I made a video called Burning Civilization to the Ground, which is, of course, what I think is happening when you do that. You are not just preventing one speaker from coming to speak, these peer authoritarians, as I would call them, have made the determination that they're going to control and manipulate and dictate and determine what is allowable to their own, to their own prescriptions, right? And that's not how, obviously, a democracy is supposed to function. There's another video that I made which was a lot more recent. I think it was very close to the 2020 election. 2020 election. And it was called Ideological Hot Wars Redux. And, I was basically just reiterating some of the points that I'd made in previous videos, but saying it's gotten worse. It's worse. It's a further warning. I will probably link all three of those videos below for anyone who's interested in seeing them. I actually think, I'm fairly proud of the punching civilization in the face video, because I think the points were pertinent, and I think, it was a reasonably good video for an extemporaneous speech type of a talking head video, which is basically what I do when I do it. And I am considering actually re-uploading that one with a dedication to the current situation, a dedication to Charlie Kirk, what he stood for and how he attempted to do that thing, which is bring your ideas to the marketplace of ideas, and I think fairly charitably contend with and address the ideas of your opponents, et cetera, et cetera. I think that was his MO, and I think he did it really well. I mean, if nothing else, I don't think one can argue with his skill at doing so. And I watched a Candace Owens video recently, a tribute to Charlie Kirk, and she talked in that video about how they used to do like debate drills. And it's like, yeah, okay, I get it. There might have been a lot of natural ability, and part of it might have been just driven by his passion and his joy for it, but also there was work ethic involved. I mean, he worked at this. He did the drills. He figured out how to do it and honed his skills, and he was very good at it. And so I might re-upload at least the punching civilization in the face video with a dedication to Charlie Kirk, because I think the message is still really, really important that I give there. A lot of this has been brought home to me because I feel like at this point in time I've lost some pretty important relationships to me as a result of this, as a result of, on my personal Facebook, posting a comment basically decrying victim blaming. I was basically saying that there's a fair amount of mental gymnastics involved in taking a man who preached nonviolence and dialogue and somehow making him responsible for his own murder. And I was just urging people who feel this way, that that's acceptable to blame him basically for his own murder. I was urging them to reflect on this. And I had some people that are reasonably close to me come at me incredibly sideways with, I would submit, no original thought whatsoever. This is all copy-paste, right from liberal, like far left claptrap stuff about, how it's just started right off with his Instagram highlighted 1776, not as a heritage, but as a coded language of directing people to conflict, and he was intent on America teetering on revolution, and his calls to violence ended up coming home to visit him, and that the people who are engaging in grief are not so much in mourning as they are turning this around to be political violence aimed at. So it's like conservative debater murdered viciously, liberals most affected kind of idea. And I got into it with this person a little bit, trying to have a reasonable discussion with them. And what I realized, and this is where I ended up personally coining the term peer authoritarians, is I started to realize, first of all, these people are operating with a modus operandi that is give no quarter ever, admit nothing, demand your opponent adhere to their own stated set of ethics and mock them and ridicule them if they don't, mind read and create terminology and label as necessary to demonize and discredit villainize your opponents, but get all kinds of bent out of shape if your opponents point out anything about you, ever call you something like a radical, or talk about having been radicalized, or even talk about your speech as being offensive or something like that, and turning it around and making it as though it's a personal attack on the person, not the speech, that they were calling you offensive rather than your speech. Things like that. It's amazing how asymmetrical, and how I'm not even sure this person I thought was a good person, I think is pretty intelligent. And in trying to assess the back and forth that we've had, it's been very difficult for me to determine if this person knows what they're doing, or if it's actually automatic at this point, that they've been through kind of the indoctrination process to the extent where this is just how they operate. And they do many things, very similar to demanding that you, for your side, which is, in theory, it should be a little bit easier for me to argue this because I'm not exactly on the other side. I mean, sure, I have some conservative principles and I like a lot of conservative people, but I also hold a lot of classical liberal and even liberal positions. And I'm open to hearing anybody that can make a good argument, and I try to be honest, because the primacy for me is internal honesty. I want to be honest with myself. That's what's most important to me. So I spend a lot of time in my hot tub deliberations, although the hot tub is broken currently, so I haven't had many of those. But certainly when I go into the bush or whatever, I spend a lot of time asking myself the question and critiquing my own worldview or my positions on certain things or my knee-jerk response to someone's speech. Are you sure about that, Mike? Is there something that you may be missing here? Let's look at something someone else has said or provided evidence for. Let's make sure that what you think is accurate. Let's run these ideas out to their logical conclusions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I certainly don't see any of that on this other person's side. And in fact, again, what I see is very asymmetric. They give no quarter. They will demand that you accept responsibility for certain shortcomings of your side, and will decry anyone. In this case, they were obviously making the direct accusation that Charlie Kirk would never, let's say, take stock for something like January 6th and the responsibility that the right has for that event and the people that partook, while at the same time never allowing even the slightest commentary or critique of anything that the left does. They just won't accept it. They won't hear it. It's a lie. It doesn't exist, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just amazing. And then, of course, again, they invent terms, and the terms aren't meant to be a descriptor for something that could then be engaged in dialogue to assess the validity of, right? If someone calls you a fascist, that's not meant to be defended empirically. That's meant, I think, as a signal to the pack that this person is human garbage. Never listen to anything they say ever. They are to be rejected to the scrap heap of human irrelevance forever and ever and amen. And that, of course, means anyone who would support them even slightly. In fact, anybody who doesn't likewise denounce them, they're also enemies. And other terminology as well that are, placeholders for any kind of an actual argument or actual empirical evidence, like stochastic terrorism or coded language. Coded language and stochastic terrorism, really, those are themselves invented terms. And what they really mean is, listen, we kind of got nothing. So this person never actually condones violence or calls for violence. So we'll call it coded language. We'll call something coded language, and we'll do the mind reading, and we get to determine. That person doesn't get to say why they put 1776 on their Instagram, why it was important to them to share that. No, they don't get to explain their intent behind it. We will commandeer their intent. That's why I've talked about these kind of concepts for years. We will commandeer their intent. And of course, because we've already signaled to the people that believe, as we do, that this person is human garbage not to be listened to, then our determination of their intent takes precedent over what they might say. Because of course, they're a bad person. So why would you listen to them, even though it's them speaking for their own actions? And that's what the whole coded language thing and stochastic terrorism really mean, is we don't really have anything, so we're just going to say stuff, and we'll even say stuff that they never say, but we'll just take stuff that they do say and we'll say, well, that's coded language. So even, I'm calling for dialogue and peace can be coded language for a call to violent instigation, et cetera, et cetera. It's quite bizarre. I knew this existed. Obviously, I've been watching for a long time this incredible human experiment, and I mean that in both the most interesting ways, the most positive ways, the most encouraging ways, those ways revolving around the human spirit, and also in the most shocking ways, the most abhorrent ways, the most harrowing ways. I've been watching this, and I guess it's more surprising when it's someone you know directly, that you know. I mean, I wouldn't say I have the closest relationship with this person, because that would shock me. That would rock me to my core, because it would surprise me to no end to not have already known this about this person. So we're a little bit at arm's length, but I will just say, I'll leave it at this and just say there is a closeness to our relationship. It spans our entire lifetimes, let's put it that way. Fortunately, we're not geographically close, but it is a serious loss, not necessarily because of this person and another person who I was involved with directly, and a third person who I was involved with indirectly. They were all of the same mindset, but because of other people in all of our orbits who, I would say, the potential for losing even more relationships exists, and their relationships I value even more, so I'm concerned about that. But it is what it is. I mean, I realize now from reading the screeds of these people, the two people in particular, I don't think there's any coming back from this. It's certainly not going to come, I don't think, through an attempt on my part to reason with them. They've already completely written me off. And, it's not from a lack of me attempting to be as charitable and as approachable and as congenial and everything else as I can be. No, it's not for a lack of that. I think they're probably lost causes, and it's probably over, and it's pretty sad for me. But of course, there are much larger things afoot than that. I'll leave it at that for now. I would like to have further discussions if any of you are interested on this idea of peer authoritarians and where we are. I would be interested in any feedback below. I'm embarking on my own sort of personal journey of trying to understand where I am as well in light of all of this, which I've been doing anyway, but not terribly successfully. But I do feel like this is a bit of a watershed moment, and maybe everything does happen for a reason. We will see. Let me know what you think. Thanks very much for watching.